theorists is like being a weathercaster. Where like we only need to be right like maybe 30% of the time to keep a job.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host of the host, Right, who's here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's like we always do. I couldn't think of a topic for today, to be honest. I was staring at my document for like 15 minutes, so instead it's an Oops All Questions episode. If you want your questions answered on the podcast, feel free to send them into freddyfazbearpizzapodcast@gmail.com. That's in the description to copy and paste because it's a pain to type out. Our first question comes from Cami S. They, them. I've been out of the loop of the lore for a bit, and I'm trying to catch up, but one thing I don't hear being talked about much is the bite of 87. I'm pretty sure someone like Withered Foxy or Mangle did it, but what domino effects were put into place once that happened? Or was it a one-off event that was tucked away so the bite of 83 could shine brighter? There's your question. I did do like a whole video on this that I'll, if I remember to, I'll link right up there. But the long and short of it is, I feel like most people don't talk about the bite of 87 for two reasons. One, like, haha, it's the meme, but it doesn't really change anything. Like, it doesn't super matter. It's kind of like a side thing that did happen, and like some people use it to explain why the animatronics aren't allowed to roam free anymore, but that doesn't super make sense because, like, so it's a whole mess, right? This is kind of why it isn't talked about. Because, like, yes, it's in FNAF 1, they can't roam free anymore because of the bite of 87. But, you know, under scrutiny, that logic never really made sense, and it felt like it was more of a throwaway line than anything, because if Withered Foxy did it, you know, well, he wasn't supposed to be roaming free anyway, so what does that mean? And if it was to a night guard, well, then it wouldn't have had to be front-facing anyway, you know, like, there's a whole bunch of things like this. It's one of those, like, small details that, like, on the face of it, the less you look at it, it makes sense, but once you start picking it apart, it falls apart. Regardless, as to who did the bite of 87, you know, traditional logic was always Mangle because of the angle that Mangle attacks you at. Some people said it's Toy Chica because of all of her, like, removing her beak. She has several lines in Ultimate Custom Night about biting somebody's, like, brain/frontal lobe. But then the week before came out, the Choose Your Own Adventure book that was all about the week before FNAF 1. And it's from the perspective of Phone Guy, Ralph. And we know this for a fact, like the secret playthrough that you need to do it again to do, he's leaving the voicemails verbatim that we hear in FNAF 1. So, like, we know that this is the Phone Guy. He has a lot of things to say about the bite. He kind of starts the book as this loyalist for Fazbear who, like, you know, he's been working with Fazbear for so long, they can do no wrong. Whatever wrongdoing they've accused of, it's either overblown or it's not that bad or it's somebody else's fault. And, you know, by the end of the book, he's changed his tune a bit. But in the beginning, he's very much like pro-Fazbear. So we hear him bring up the bite of 87 when it's relevant a couple times. At first, it was victim blaming. Because the first time he brings it up, he mentions that, like, yeah, you know, they got a bad rap ever since that bite, and, like, he was the employee who caused it. He shouldn't have been messing with Foxy or whatever, something along those lines. And he does mention, interestingly, and this is a good point, he brings up that the victim of the bite of 87, while he survived, he can't do much of, like he can't write, he can't walk, you know. So that does shoot down a couple theories that, you know, I had a theory before then that Cassie's dad was Jeremy Fitzgerald. And that, like, he gets the bite of 87, loses a lot of memory, remembers that he likes Fazbear but can't figure out exactly why, and he ends up working for the Help Wanted developers, and he's that Jeremy who survives that, and then he ends up being the Help Wanted 2 protagonist in that sense. And I think that was a really solid theory. it does get disproven a bit by the fact that in the week before, it stated the victim of the bite of 87 would not be capable of any of that. Like, it hospitalizes them permanently. Now, to be fair, Cassie's ad could still be Jeremy from Help Wanted. That's a different thing. The week before, then in other moments, keeps relating. It keeps making slight allusions to Foxy being the culprit. The idea that, like, shining a flashlight in Foxy's face can mess with him. That is like, oh, you know, he only had that one bad thing that happened. And, like, it keeps mentioning over and over again something in particular bad happened with Foxy, and it mentions it around the bite of 87. So the idea that Withered Foxy was the one to do the bite of 87, I believe, is very much promoted in the week before. I'll be honest, I'm forgetting the specific reasons why. But again, videos over there, if I remembered, to go and check that out if you want the specific reasons why. But the general consensus of the theory is that the week before posits Withered Foxy as the prime candidate for the bite of 87. All this to say, that's a fun conversation to have. It's a fun theory to make. It's fun to, like, dig into the evidence we have there and make your logics and your reasonings. But again, the bite of 87 changes fuck all. Like, it doesn't really... No main characters are affected by it as far as we're aware. Its reasoning for the end of free roam animatronics is tenuous at best. There's just more important things that are being to the lore. There's more important things to the lore that are still, like, hotly debated. And I think that's the main reason why you don't hear it being talked about as much anymore. Because, like, in a franchise where we still don't know like, I believe the crying child's name is Dave. I believe BarBADroid's theory. That's a theory. And in a franchise where one of the main characters, we still have no confirmed mention of their name, the bite of 87 takes a back burner. You know, that's in my opinion, that's the vibe. But thank you for your question. I hope that was helpful. Again, if I remember, video. Our next question comes from EP Soldier, he, him. It's Poppy Playtime. There's a couple in here. Like I said, I'm not going to dedicate a video to Poppy Playtime moving forward until the next, like, chapter starts coming out, but I'll obviously still answer questions. Feel free to ask whatever question you want. I've done Pokemon questions on this podcast. I don't care. It's my podcast. Fuck you. This next question comes from EP Soldier, he, him. Now that we're pretty sure Rich got an executive position, what are your thoughts on the executive slides we see in Chapter 2? The letters from that, per Reddit, since I don't own Chapter 2, were AABEHIJMNOY. But those letters really don't line up with Richard Lovett's. Does this mean the last executive slide was the Warden's? Wanted to get your thoughts since you brought up the executives in regards to Rich during last week's video. Thank you for your question. I do remember the letters, because I remember... Oh, what was the name I came up with? I had a Poppy video trying to solve that name. And I think it was like Amina Bajoy or something like that. Because this was before we knew what the Hour of Joy was. And I was like, I wonder if our player let the toys go or, like, started their escape. And her last name was Bajoy. You know, and, like, that's what the Hour of Joy was. I was wrong. Sometimes we're wrong. Most times we're wrong. Being a theorist is like being a weathercaster. Where, like, we only need to be right, like, maybe 30% of the time to keep a job. And that's just because shit's unpredictable. I do remember the letters fondly. I hesitate to say the fifth executive slide is anybody but Richard Lovett's. And the main reason being, at this point, we would have heard about them. The Warden would not have been mentioned above the prison sector. Could you imagine? Could you imagine being at the game station and you're like, oh, what are these? Oh, well, dear children, these are our 5 executives. They handle all sorts of things. What about that one on the end? Oh, that's the Warden of our underground prison. They're not bringing that up. You know, they're not bringing that up. I genuinely think the 5th slide is Richard Lovett's, and I just think the letters were a red herring. Because if you could spell Richard Lovett's with the letters on the 5th slide, we would have known this since Chapter 2. And admittedly, that's too early to reveal the player, I think. We still don't really know who Rich is or why he would be here. So the idea that like the letters would, because again, yes, you'd have to spell it out, but that's not a super hard puzzle to have letters that spell out Richard Lovitz. We would have thought, maybe we would have gotten the last name wrong, but we would have landed on Richard pretty quickly. And I just think they recognize giving us the player's identity in chapter 2 is too early. Now you could argue then just don't have the letters because that's an irresponsible red herring. Fair. I think the letters were meant to show the sign was destroyed. There is a fifth executive. You don't get to know their name yet. I think that's mainly what we were getting. Because if there wasn't letters, then we would have been like, oh, maybe they were going to add a fifth executive. Or if there was a sign, like, you know, because this would have happened during the Hour of Joy, most likely. So there wouldn't be like a sign being like under repairs or anything like that. Like they need to show this is a broken sign in a way that we can't solve the name of. Then maybe there was a way to do that and not have letters that aren't there. Like maybe the responsible thing would be have like half the letters so you can't spell Richard, but like you can kind of spell some words. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, no, I'm pretty sure the story of Rich is that the reason he gets the slide and the reason it's up there and the reason he's the fifth executive is because, like they said, they're going to fire him. But giving him this big slide and the big car, it's again like a very visual, in-your-face promotion. Like I wouldn't even doubt that the slides were put there for this whole bit. You know, they like I wouldn't doubt it. But yeah, I think the fifth slide is Richard Lovitz. I think the letters don't line up because we would have solved it and we would have learned his identity too early. That's my opinion. Or there is a fifth executive. We just don't know about it yet, but that seems a little strange. Our next question. Oh, thank you for your question. Our next question comes from Andrew, him. Scott keeps putting Circus Baby and all his new stuff and sister location related things in his games. Do you think Circus Baby will make a return? Thank you for your question. I don't know, but that is weird, huh? Like, I think part of it is Scott and Steele will recognize that Circus Baby is a very recognizable character. That's definitely part of it. But it's interesting to consider that, like Help Wanted 2 in particular sticks out to me. That, yes, there wasn't much sister location in Help Wanted 1, but to include so much sister location in Help Wanted 2, to the fact that if you're playing a normal playthrough, it is most likely the final level and final boss of the game to do a unique and new encounter with Circus Baby in the private office. That's nuts. Like, that seems purposeful. But then, like, why? Like, what? Why? Why are we doing this? Like, Elizabeth Afton should be dead and gone. You know, FNAF 6 fire, burns it away, her spirit moves on, whatever, yada, yada. Are we to think this is maybe Fiona's doing? Because I do believe the Fiona machine would have been moved into the sister location bunker. Possibly. I don't know. There's a lot of weirdness about what this is. I don't think there's a good way to know yet. My big swing, my big prediction is that the next FNAF game chronologically, maybe not the next one that comes out, but the next one that continues the story will be sister location related, because I think the torn down old bunker we run into at the end of Ruin, the one that has the scooper, I think that's the sister location bunker. Like, just logistically it makes sense, locationally it makes sense. It just, everything lines up for it to be sister location, besides the fact that visually it looks different. And there's so many ways to explain that, you know. Maybe this is what sister location actually looks like, and what we saw was more so what Steve Snodgrass made. Maybe there was too much hallucinogenic gas when Mike went down there, so he was seeing it more futuristic than it is. I don't know. Like, there's 1,000 reasons why it looks a little visually different, but locationally it makes sense. Logically it makes sense. Like, everything about it makes sense for that to be sister location. And I could be wrong, but if it is, then the last time we saw Cassie was near sister location. So the idea that the next game of rescuing Cassie is going through the old sister location ruins, all this Circus Baby stuff, all this sister location stuff could be the teaser for that. And I think that's our most likely explanation. Either that or, hey, it's cool and Circus Baby's recognizable. It's one or the other. Take your pick. Thank you for your question. Our next question comes from Smiley, and y'all. I saw someone acknowledge something interesting about what the prototype says when referring to the orphans in Chapter 5. I did what I had to do. They're in a better place now. The phrase better place being interestingly capitalized in the subtitles. It's also worth knowing that in the tape with Ollie and Elliot, Ollie refers to it again as, it was never about me, never about my better place. Once again, capitalized. Lily also refers to a better place as well during her final chase, although that time there's no punctuation. Is it an actual place? Are the orphans actually still alive in some capacity? I wanted to ask your thoughts whether or not this had been brought to your attention already. So I'm of two minds of this. Because, like, I understand the want to be like, actually, the orphans are alive, and, like, we can save them. Better place might be a real thing, and we will talk about that. I feel like this chapter, in no uncertain terms, specifies the orphans are dead. Everyone talks about how the orphans are dead. Lily was gonna say that the orphans are dead. Giblet says that the orphans are dead. The twist that, like, actually they are alive doesn't even make sense. Because even the prototype is like, I did what I had to do. That's, like, it doesn't... If better place is a real thing, and it's a thing that doesn't mean death, then Poppy would know about it too. So when he said they're in a better place now, she wouldn't be as upset if she didn't know about it. So that being said, it is interesting that better place keeps being capitalized, not about my better place. They're in a better place now. And, you know, Lily has a line where the Lily line brought up, she's like, if I won't get my better place, then I'll make sure you don't either, or something like that. I genuinely think better place is just their way of saying heaven. Like, I think it makes the most sense that way, because every time it's used, it makes the most sense in that case. And sometimes the shortest walk is the correct answer. Especially with, like, Lily, right? Because, like, with Lily in particular, I think is a perfect example. Because Miss Gracie gets attacked by the toys in the Hour of Joy, and she gets turned into Lily Lovebraids. A fate worse than death. Specified in game that, like, death was deemed too kind for Miss Gracie. We need to show her what she deserves. So if Lily, now this toy who's unable to die of normal means, is stuck this way, it's kind of this idea of, like, I didn't get my better place. I didn't get to die. I'm stuck being this. I think the prototype recognizes that humans, in some way, since they can die, they can get to a better place. The prototype and Poppy will never get to a better place because they can't die. That's the prototype's whole motivation, is that Poppy and the prototype will never die. They cannot die. And the prototype doesn't want to be alone for infinity. The prototype doesn't want to be alone for the rest of time. So he wants everyone to be immortal, so he'll never be alone again. Because at the core of the prototype is still Ollie, a scared little kid. The idea of, like, what better place is referring to. I really... It would be a very contrived twist that better place is actually all the way down here, below the factory, below the jail, below the laboratories, below all of this, is actually like a happy, sunshine, good times room that the orphans are just chilling inside of and having a great time. Like, what are we talking about here? That seems like the Poppy Playtime is known for being, like, the darkest of the indie horrors, at least lore-wise. You know, like, it is the most intense. It is the most, like, there are dead people. There's thousands of dead children. They were being experimented on. You know, they're being torn apart and put back together. Like, a really fucked up lore. To have the final twist of the game be actually all the orphans are okay and they were just hanging out and drinking juice boxes and coloring crayons. What are we talking about here? Especially because the Hour of Joy was a decade ago. The Hour of Joy was a decade ago. If the orphans are alive, they're, like, turning into young adults at this point. Just let them go. Like, you know, like, if they were, like, a bunch of, like, 10 and 12-year-olds, they're 20 now. Let them leave. Are they still fucking drinking juice boxes down there? That does sound like a fate worse than death. So the idea that better place is a real place and it's a good thing and it's what they want, I don't think so. I don't think it makes any sense. I think it is a good part of a lot of us to want the best for these children that are looking into Better Place being capitalized, when I think genuinely, here's my hot take. I think at some point in the script, Better Place was heaven, or some term for the afterlife. And when it was changed to avoid, the controversy of bringing something up like that, they forgot to decapitalize it in some of the subtitles. It's a lame explanation. Like or Better Place being capitalized is just using the afterlife as a proper noun. That's literally the only thing I can think of. It is. I do not think it's an actual place. I do not think the orphans are alive. I think that'd be a really lame twist at the end of all of this incredibly dark gameplay to be like, actually, everyone's happy and everything worked out in the end. I'm 99% convinced the good ending of this game is we get down there, we defeat the prototype, and then we kill the entire factory with ourselves inside of it. Like, that's the only good ending for all of this, is to burn it all down. Either that or destroy the top 4 layers and make sure toys can never leave this underground area and make the underground area nicer. Like, that's literally it. They can't be freed. We can't free the toys. That would be hell on earth for the toys and for Earth. So I think it has to be this way. But yeah, I don't see a Better Place being a real thing. That's just my opinion. Because I've seen a lot of people bring that up. And you're not the only one to bring it up. But in my opinion, it does not make sense to be a real place that's like good. Unless, you have one explanation. Better Place is a real place and it's really bad. That maybe Better Place is the term they used to tell the children about like being adopted or something. And it turns out it's actually a laboratory again, like another secondary laboratory that's really bad. But I don't know. I don't see Better Place being a real place that means it's a good thing. It might be a real place in the factory, we'll see, but it's not going to be a good thing. I do not think those orphans have survived. Why would the prototype and Lily lie about that? Why would Giblet know about it? Like Giblet's talking to Chum, he's like, she doesn't know about the orphans. I don't want to be the one to tell her. So like, I don't know. That's my thoughts on it anyway. Thank you for your question, Smiley. Our next one comes from Ren, they. Back when Sister Location first came out, Ballora was a big deal, and a lot of people, myself included, thought she'd be haunted by the ghost of Mrs. Afton. I don't think that's the case anymore, but with how much more important she seemed compared to Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy, I'm curious what you think her deal may be. Obviously, she's not a big player in the original timeline story, but I always like to deal with these kind of loose ends and figured to have some interesting thoughts on it. Thank you for a question. I do like the idea that each individual Funtime was modeled after a specific resident of the Afton family. Not modeled after, but like inspired by. Because we have the line Elizabeth says where she's like, didn't you make her for me in relation to Circus Baby? It's like, well, can we extend that logic to the other Funtimes? And like, kind of, yeah. So we have 4 Funtime animatronics. We have Funtime Foxy, Funtime Freddy, Ballora, and Circus Baby. Circus Baby being Elizabeth, we're told. Ballora being the mother, Mrs. Afton, sure, adult woman. We then get Funtime Foxy and Funtime Freddy. And it's interesting that the 2 remaining Afton members link up pretty well with both of those. We have Funtime Freddy for the crying child, a child related to Freddy in more ways than one, and also needs a small toy version of a Fazbear character to calm them down. And what is the crying child but a crying child who needs a small toy version of a Fazbear character to calm down with? Psychic friend Fredbear. And then we have Funtime Foxy, who, Michael Afton and Foxy. Michael Afton was literally called Foxy Bro until we knew his name. So I do like that idea that like, and it's not like a 1-to-1 or anything like that, but that the Funtimes are all like loosely inspired by the family members of William Afton's family. That's fun. That's like a fun side theory. And like you said, is that important to the original timeline? No. Is that super big in the lore? No. But it's a fun thought. It's a fun idea. It's fun to talk about. So, yeah. Thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Dagna and y'all. If most things in the Silver Eyes have been shown to be different in the quote-unquote main universe, i.e. instead of sound discs, we have illusion gas, instead of Stabby the robot, we have the ending of Pizza Sim killing Henry. Stabby the robot's crazy. Instead of an evil Charlie bot, we have Circus Baby. Why is it that we still think Remnant is metal bonded with spirit energy? 2 reasons. 1, all of that is from the novel trilogy in the Silver Eyes. Remnant is in the Silver Eyes, but most prominently featured in the Fazbear Fright stories. So it is a recurring thing in the Fazbear Fright stories where the rest of that isn't. 2, it's less that something in the book is definitely different than the games, and it's more that the books are in a alternate universe of the games, and things may or may not carry over. So you're right. We don't have sound. We might have sound discs. We don't have evidence of sound, like good evidence of sound discs existing. We have hallucination gas. Hallucination gas came from a book, by the way. Just by the way. But like in the Silver Eyes, William Afton and Henry Emily open up Fredbear's Family Diner. That's the same. William Afton killed 5 children using a Spring Bonnie suit. That's the same. And this is just the Silver Eyes, which is definitely a different story. And then we get to like Fazbear Frights, where some people argue that's even those stories are in game. I don't think that's true, but we have these repeated themes of things that are, Remnant being talked about in the Fazbear Frights, and we get explanations of Remnant and Fazbear Frights, and then you get to the games, and Remnant is described, is directly mentioned in the blueprints of the Scooper, and the Scooper mentions that heat may help nullify or like temporarily subdue that, and what would you be applying heat to? Well, there's a lot of metal down there. I think the books are more useful when looked at as a possible guide than something to combat. So it's not necessarily, I would not say it's true that if it's in the books, it's different in the games. I would say it is potentially true that if it's in the books and not in the games, we need to consider why. And if it's in both the games and the books, what can we carry over? I think it's just generally a more cohesive way of looking at it, frankly. That'd be my opinion on that. But, thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Sunday, he, him. This is another Pop Playtime question. At the beginning of Chapter 5, a couple of Automals mentioned someone called the Judge. Who is this? I feel like it can't be the prototype, because why wouldn't they just say the prototype? Could it be Harley Sawyer, a Playtime executive, Giblet, someone new? They were question. Yeah, that's one of the things that really stood out to me as strange, is that moment where it's like, there is no outside. The Judge told us. We can't trust the Judge. We can't trust anyone not like us. And that's it. So we get a line that someone called the Judge has told the toys down here that there is no outside. And we get more information that this same the Judge is not one of the Automals in the beginning of the chapter. So who the fuck is the Judge? I think it has to be a new character that we didn't get introduced to yet, and we're going to find them out soon. I think that's the only explanation that makes sense, because you're right. If it's the prototype, they would have said, the prototype said there's no, they did not. They said the Judge. It wouldn't be Harley Sawyer. Everyone called him the Doctor. They would just say the Doctor said there's no. They said the Judge. I also don't think it's Giblet, because like I feel like that would have been part of his character, is to say, oh yeah, they call me the Judge around here. Like there would have been some explanation for that, but there isn't. And like, why would they even call him the Judge? Why is he the Judge? That's a very interesting and specific line. Like the motherfucker says, I'm not a hero 4 times. I'm sure he could have said, they call me a judge once. So it really comes down to, I think it is a new character we have not been introduced yet. And maybe that's the foreshadowing. Is then the next chapter we'll meet whoever the Judge is and get to know more about them. I think that'd be fun. That's a good way to like tease an upcoming character. As it stands, really confusing line. I do not think there's a single toy that is a good candidate to be the Judge that we currently know of. And that's another reason why I'm like almost certain it is a new character. Because if not, why didn't they just tell us who it was? But thank you for your question. And our next one comes from Rodrigo, he, him. Why do so many people find it strange that Henry disappeared from the franchise for so long after Charlie's death? If you really stop to think about it, it actually makes sense within the narrative. It's not just that he spent all of his time grieving. He could have been working behind the scenes, uncovering William's bunker, Remnant experiments, coming up with a plan to destroy all the remaining possessed animatronics that are all roaming around. All this while renovating Fredbear's to be this new pizza place, along with that whole incendiary mechanism hidden underground. That alone could have taken years of preparation, testing, and planning, and it just so happened to only be ready after the events of FNAF 3. You raise a good point, Rodrigo. Because I had always taken FNAF 3 as the inciting incident for FNAF 6, right? The idea that, like, Henry is just grieving it off by himself until he sees on the newspaper that, like, oh shit, things are still happening with Fazbear. I gotta do something. And then he goes to begin the FNAF 6 details, which, you know, that does line up if you think FNAF 3 is 2015 and FNAF 6 is 2023. That does line up then. But there's a lot of ways to look at it. I think you're right to say that it would have taken a lot of time to make FNAF 6 a thing that can happen, because it is a crazy thing to consider. Like how long it would have taken for Henry to build FNAF 6, taking a pizzeria restaurant and basically making like a fake maze underneath it that can burn everything inside of it. That's a crazy thing to build. That would take a long time. Not to mention even things like Lefty. Building an animatronic that is specifically made to find another animatronic and capture it? What are we talking about here? Like, that's a lot of stuff to build. So I think I do agree that some of the timeline of Henry not being in the story is the planning for FNAF 6. I just think FNAF 3 being an inciting incident makes a lot of sense, and it's very convenient. Do I think he could have made everything necessary for FNAF 6 in 8 years? Who can say? I got no idea, dog. I got no idea. But it's possible. It's possible. I could see it happening. But yeah. I think you're right to say that it's not necessarily strange that Henry disappeared. And I don't think it's strange. I think, if anything, the sentiment that I would see a lot of is people being not necessarily disappointed, but a little like shocked to see that like the entire franchise was wrapped up by somebody who up until FNAF 6 wasn't a games character. Like, Henry is mentioned in Silver Eyes quite often. So, like, you know, if you read the books, if you've been paying attention to the outside lore, you know who Henry is by the time of FNAF 6. If you only play the games, Henry is not mentioned at all. As far as we're aware, FNAF 6's guy, no clue who the fuck he is if you just played the games. So I think that's really what it is. It feels like Naruto's ending, which, like, spoiler alert for Naruto, but Naruto had a really good final villain of Madara Uchiha, and the whole final arc is dealing with him. And then we're rug pulled, and it turns out all of this was because an ancient goddess was still meddling with humanity or some shit, and a character that none of us knew who popped up at the like butt-ass end of the show is actually the real villain, and she's the big threat all of the sudden, and we have to deal with her. That felt bad. that didn't feel great. So I think some people, you know, if they weren't super locked in, feel the same way about Henry, which, you know, to some extent is a valid feeling. But yeah, that'd be my thoughts on that. Thank you for the question. And our last question from today from Rainash, they, them. In Security Breach, we see the blob, and if we take a closer look at it, the puppet mask does not have purple tears, meaning it's not possessed in the same body and is most likely still around, because its main purpose is to protect from Afton. In UCN, this is a wild claim, but I just want to know for sure. What if the blob is the puppet? Another thing is, I watched a video about Burntrap, about how his endo, fingers, and legs from different animatronics in the series. What are your thoughts about this? I don't fully understand this, and I'm not even sure it's true. So, we'll take these in two halves. For the blob, I genuinely think the majority of animatronic mess of the blob is scrap. And when I say that, I also include leftovers from projects like Special Delivery, where there was a lot of copies of animatronics being made. Now, granted, was the puppet in Special Delivery? Now that I think about it, maybe not, because like it doesn't really make sense. The whole thing about Special Delivery is you have to like put them put like endoskeletons inside of it, right? I'm not getting a good straight answer for this. It's hard to tell what's fan-made and not. It's really difficult. I'm going to assume no, because I'm not seeing any clear yeses. So it does kind of throw a wrench in what I was saying. But I think it does make sense that like if they were making new models of these characters to go in that way. And that's where a lot of this extra stuff comes from. However, consider, I also think it makes a lot of sense that the blob is what Molten Freddy truly is. The blob is like, everything got melted together and then their agony possessed what was left over. And that formed the blob. It's just a pile of agony and leftover melted animatronics. So, if everyone's spirits did move on, then the tears not being there makes sense. Charlotte would have moved on by then. So is that too. There's a couple ways to look at it. As far as Burn Trap goes, yes, that's kind of true. It's that like the Burn Trap endoskeleton, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I can just look this up. Hey, I can just look this up. No, that looks like one solid endoskeleton. That looks pretty continuous. It just looks like Spring Bonnie but burnt. TBH. You might be confusing it with the Mimic. The Mimic in Security Breach Ruin is of a bunch of different animatronics stitched together. That makes sense because the whole thing about the Mimic is it can repair itself. So like, yeah. I think that answered your question. Sorry, that was kind of a weird way to answer the question, but it's I would say the blob makes the most sense as the conglomerate of what was left over after the FNAF 6 fire possessed by agony, and Burn Trap is just one endo as far as I'm aware. Fingers and legs are from different animatronics. Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe a new endoskeleton model for the sake of Security Breach. I could be wrong in there. The fingers do look sharper than a Spring Bonnie endo. It looks more like a Nightmare endo. But then again, unfortunately, how much of Burn Trap is real is the question we have to ask. Because it seems like it may have been more of a hallucination than we initially thought because of the whole miscommunication with Steel Wool about Security Breach. It's tough. I would say Security Breach is a game that we should be looking at for evidence as much as possible, but we shouldn't hold to too much scrutiny for details because a lot of that was mishandled. I don't know. It's something to look into. But anyway, I think we'll call it there. If you want your questions answered on the podcast, feel free to send it into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. It's in the description to copy and paste because it's a pain to type out. But until the next time, as always, you've been watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. I hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.